Introduced in 1987, the EF Lens Mount is the standard lens mount on the Canon EOS family of SLR film and digital cameras. EF stands for Electro-Focus. Automatic focusing on EF lenses is handled by a dedicated electric motor built into the lens. Mechanically, it is a bayonet-style mount, and all communication between camera and lens takes place through electrical contacts. There are no mechanical levers or plungers. In 2003, Canon introduced the Efs Lens Mount, a derivative of the EF mount that is strictly for digital EOS cameras with APS-C sensors released after 2003. EF lenses can be mounted on EFS bodies, but Efs lenses cannot be mounted on EF bodies. In October 2012, Canon introduced the Efm Lens Mount, a derivative designed exclusively for mirrorless interchangeable-lens cameras with APS-C sensors. EF and EFS lenses can be mounted on EFM bodies via the optional Mount Adapter EF-EOS M. History. The EF mount replaces its predecessor, the FD mount. The standard autofocus lens mounting technology of the time used a motor in the camera body to drive the mechanics of the focus helicoid in the lens by using a transfer lever. The key innovation of the EF series was to use a motor inside the lens itself for focusing. This allowed for autofocusing lenses which did not require mechanical levers in the mount mechanism, only electrical contacts to supply power and instructions to the lens motor. The motors were designed for the particular lens they were installed in. When the EF mount was introduced in 1987, it had the largest mount diameter among all 35 ohm SLR cameras. The EF series includes over 60 lenses. The EF series has encompassed focal lengths from 8 to 1200 ohm. The EFM mount was introduced with two lenses, a 22mm prime and an 18-55mm zoom. Many EF lenses include such features as Canon's ultrasonic motor drive, an image stabilization system, diffractive optics and, particularly for L-series lenses, fluorite and aspherical lens elements. Versatility. Its large diameter and relatively short flange focal distance of 44.0 ohm allows mechanical adaptation of EF camera bodies to many types of non-EF lenses. It is possible to mount lenses using the Nikon F mount, Olympus OM, Leica and Universal M42 lens mounts by the use of a mechanical adapter. Conversely, partial adaptation of EF lenses to non-EF camera bodies is not generally possible with only a mechanical adapter. Lenses for the earlier Canon FD lens mount are not usable for general photography on an EF or EFS mount camera, unless adapters with optical elements are used because they are made for a flange focal distance of only 42.0 ohm. Infinity focus would be lost with an adapter which lacks optical elements. The Canon FD EOS adapter is rare and is only usable with certain FD telephoto lenses. With a manual connection, the aperture and focus controls of the lens cannot be controlled or read from the camera. The lens must be focused manually. Since the only possible metering is through the lens must be manually stopped down to accurately meter at anything less than full aperture. With the introduction of the Canon EOS M mirrorless digital camera, an inexpensive adapter allows the full use, including infinity focusing, of nearly all FD and FL lenses. For other lens types, an adapter would act as an extension tube, causing the lens to lose the ability to focus to infinity. Alternatively, the lens adapters would include optical elements and act as weak teleconverters, as well as possibly losing optical quality. Third-party lenses. Compatible third-party lenses with the EF Lens Mount are manufactured by Samyang, Schneider, Sigma, Tamron, Tokina, and Carl Zeiss. The manufacturers of these lenses have reverse-engineered the EOS electronics. The use of these lenses is not supported by Canon. Sometimes compatibility problems arise, as no third party has access to Canon specifications for camera-to-body communication. These compatibility issues mostly occur when using a newer body with an older third-party lens. Over time, most of these issues have been resolved by the major third-party brands. Controls and features. Canon EF lenses typically have a number of controls, switches and physical features, used by the photographer to control the lens. The types and number of the controls can vary from lens to lens, with the most basic lenses having only a few, to the most complex having over a dozen different controls and switches. This is a list of the different controls and switches found on most Canon EF lenses, along with a detailed description on what they are used for. Lens mount index. This marking is found on all EF lenses. It is used for matching the EF lens mount to the mount on an EOS body, so one can connect the lens to the body quickly. On EF lenses, this is a raised, round red mark, while on EFs lenses it is a square white mark. Focusing ring. This control, found on most EF lenses, is used for focusing the lens. It is usually a ring on the lens body, that can be turned. On some lenses, such as the Canon EF-S 18 to 55 mm lens, this is simply the inner lens barrel. Zoom ring. This control is found on most EF zoom lenses. It is used for changing the focal length of the lens. The zoom ring usually has certain, common, focal lengths marked on it. To set the zoom ring to any given focal length, one must turn the ring so that the marked focal length matches the zoom index. The zoom index is typically a white, or black, line found next to the zoom ring. Distance scale window. This feature is found on many EF lenses. This feature, while not a control or switch, is useful to the photographer for determining, or setting, the lens's focus distance. It is used in conjunction with the focusing ring. When rotated, the distance scale will also rotate to show the changing focus distance. On some lenses the distance scale also has an infrared index. These are shown as red markings below the distance scale. This is used for making focus adjustments when the photographer is doing infrared photography, as lenses typically focus infrared light at a different point than visible light, and therefore achieving correct focus using visible light will result in an out-of-focus infrared image. To make an adjustment, first focus the subject, then turn the focusing ring so it matches the corresponding infrared index mark. Focus mode switch. This switch is found on most EF lenses that have an autofocus feature. It is used for setting the lens to either autofocus mode, or manual focus. When set to autofocus mode, the lens will autofocus when directed to by the camera. When set to manual focus, the lens is focused using the focusing ring. Some lenses support full-time manual focusing, which allows the photographer to focus the lens manually even with the mode switch set to AF, without damaging the lens. Focusing distance range limiter switch. This switch is found on most longer focal length lenses, and macro lenses. It is used for limiting the focusing distance range of the lens when using it in autofocus mode. Most lenses have two settings. These are usually full focus range, and distant focus range. Other lenses have three settings, with the additional setting usually being near focus range. Longer focal length lenses and macro lenses have a relatively long travel distance for the focusing mechanism inside the lens. This feature shortens the autofocus time. When the photographer knows they will not need a certain part of the focus distance range, limiting it will help shorten the autofocus time, and possibly prevent focus hunting. Soft focus ring. This ring is found only on the 135mm soft focus prime lens, and enables a variable soft focus effect from completely sharp to very soft, although it has little effect when used with apertures over f/5.6. Although the ring can be set to any position, two stops are implemented at positions 1 and 2. Image stabilizer switch. This switch is found on all EF lenses that feature an image stabilizer. It is used for turning the image stabilizer on, or off. Image stabilizer mode switch. This switch is found on many EF lenses that feature an image stabilizer, particularly those of longer focal lengths. The switch has two settings on most lenses, Mode 1 and Mode 2. The newest is Mark II versions of certain EF Super Telephoto lenses, plus the 200 400mm f/4Ls, have a third setting, Mode 3. Mode 1 is normal mode, used for typical photography, where the subject does not move. Mode 2 is used for panning. This is useful for sports or wildlife photography, where the subject moves constantly and one will need to pan. Mode 3, intended to track action, is similar to Mode 2 in that it ignores panning. However, it only applies stabilization when the shutter is really as the viewfinder image is not stabilized. One should not use Mode 1 for panning as this will typically cause blurred photographs. The image stabilizer will attempt to correct for all motion, including the panning motion, but cannot do so due to the limited range of motion of the EOS mechanism. Older lenses that have an image stabilizer, but do not feature this switch, are permanently in Mode 1. Some newer lenses, such as the Canon EF s18-200mm lens, are able to detect if they are being panned in either axis and will automatically disable the stabilization for the axis parallel to movement and therefore do not require this switch. Autofocus stop buttons. These buttons are found on some super telephoto EF lenses, evenly spaced around the front collar of the lens. They are used for temporarily stopping the autofocus feature of the lens. Only one button needs to be pressed to activate the feature. To use this button, one must first have the autofocus active, then when one wishes to halt autofocus, one presses and holds the button. To resume autofocus, one releases the button. Some newer bodies allow these buttons to be assigned to perform other functions. For instance, the Canon EOS 7D allows the photographer to set these buttons to perform any of 6 functions. Focus preset. The focus preset feature is found on most super telephoto EF lenses. The focus preset feature uses one switch, one button, and one ring. It is used for presetting a given focus distance into memory, so that the photographer can quickly recall the focus distance, without the need for autofocus. The switch has 3 settings: off, on, or on with sound, and is used for turning on the feature, and deciding if sound is desired. The set button is used for saving the focus distance into memory. The focus preset ring is used for recalling the memory save point. It is a thin knurled ring, usually located in front of the focusing ring. To use this feature, one must set the switch to either on, or on with sound, focus the lens to the desired distance, then press the set button. After this, when the feature is turned on, the photographer can turn the focus preset ring, and the lens will recall and focus quickly to the distance that was saved. This feature is useful for sports and birding photography. Filter mounting. This mount is used for attaching filters to EF lenses. There are 3 types: front threaded mount, inner drop-in mount, and rear gelatin holders. Front threaded filters are used on most lenses, and are attached by threading and tightening the filter. Inner, drop-in filter mounts are used on super telephoto EF lenses. They are attached by first pressing the 2 buttons on the filter mount, and pulling it out. Then either a round threaded filter is attached, or one can use a gelatin filter. Rear gelatin filter holders are used by cutting out a sheet of gelatin, to the size shown on the back of the lens and then sliding it into the holder. Filter mounts are useful for all types of photography, and every EF lens has either 1 or 2 of the 3 types used. Lens hood mount. This feature is found on most EF lenses. This mount is used for attaching the lens hood. The hood mount is of a bayonet style on most EF lenses, though a clip-on style hood mount is used for a small selection of current lenses. Tripod collar. This feature is found on most longer focal length lenses, and macro lenses. The tripod collar is used for attaching the tripod ring. There are 2 main styles of tripod rings. One type is opened up, placed on the lens tripod collar, then closed and tightened. The other type does not open, but instead is slid up the lens from the mount end and tightened. To set the tripod ring so that it is level with the lens, rotate the ring until the index mark on the tripod ring matches the index mark on the distance scale. The tripod ring is used for attaching a tripod monopod near to the point of balance of the lens body combination, more conveniently than the camera body. In the case of larger and heavier lenses, there is also less strain on the lens mount if the body is supported by the tripod-mounted lens than if the lens were to be supported by a tripod-mounted body. Related technologies. With the release of the EOS 300D, Canon introduced a variation on the standard EF lens mount called EFS. The S stands for Small Image Circle. EFS uses the standard EF bayonet mount, but with minor physical alterations which prevent EFS lenses from being mounted on bodies which do not support them. There are a couple of benefits to EFS lenses, both related to the smaller sensor size. One is that since a lens designed for a smaller sensor need only project an image circle large enough to cover the small sensor, the lens itself can be smaller. It can therefore also be lighter and have lower materials costs, since the lens elements, made of relatively heavy and expensive optical glass, will be smaller than in a comparable full-frame lens. Such a lens, if used on a body with a larger sensor, would leave the outer portions of the sensor outside its image circle, and therefore they would be black, but since EFS lenses will not physically mount on incompatible bodies, this problem is avoided. The second benefit is that, since a body with a smaller sensor can use a smaller mirror, the rear element of the lens can extend somewhat into the body without danger of being struck by the mirror. Particularly for a wide-angle lens, this gives the lens designers more freedom in designing the lens optical formula. Note that even though the first 4 models of the 1D line of Canon EOS cameras have a 1.3x crop sensor, they are not compatible with EFS lenses. The most recent entry in the 1D line, the 1DX, is full-frame. The release of the Canon EOS M, the company's first mirrorless interchangeable-lens camera, saw the introduction of another variation on the standard EF mount, called EFM. Because Canon reduced the flange focal distance from that of its EOS DSLR line, the mount was altered so that EF and EFS lenses cannot mount directly on EFM bodies. Canon supplies an optional adapter that allows both EF and EFS lenses to be mounted on EFM bodies. Ultrasonic motor drive. Ultrasonic motor lenses appeared with the introduction of the EF-300 f/2.8L Eos M lens in 1987. Canon was the first camera maker to successfully commercialize the Eos M technology. EF lenses equipped with Eos M drives have fast, silent and precise autofocus operations, and consume less power compared to other AF drive motors. There are 2 types of Eos Ms, the ring-type Eos M and the micromotor Eos M. Ring-type Eos M allows for full-time manual focus operations without switching out of AF mode. Micromotor Eos M is used to bring down the cost of the lens. It is possible to implement FTM even with micromotor Eos M. However, it requires additional mechanical components, and the vast majority of micro Eos M lenses do not offer such capability. Some older Eos M lenses are identified with a gold ring and the label ultrasonic printed in gold on the lens barrel. All L lenses which have Eos M do not have the gold ring, but the red ring which denotes them as an L lens. However, they have the label ultrasonic printed in red on the lens barrel. Stepping motor. Stepping motor lenses were first announced in June 2012, alongside the announcement of the EOS 650D Rebel T4i KISS X6i. Canon claims that this technology allows smooth and silent autofocus, and with compatible bodies, will provide continuous autofocus in live view and video. Unlike Eos M, STM lenses use focus by wire to enable full-time manual mode, which means that rather than manually moving lens elements, rotating the focus ring commands the stepping motor to change focus. This means an STM lens's focus cannot be retracted by turning the focus ring while the camera is off. Both lenses introduced with the EOS M, the EFM 22mm pancake prime and EFM 18 a Euro 55mm zoom, also feature STM technology. The most recent EFM lens, the 11 a Euro 22mm, is also an STM lens. All stepping motor lenses are marked with the letters STM on the front of the lens as part of the model designation. Image stabilizer. The image stabilization technology detects handheld motion and optically corrects it. It only corrects handheld motion. If the subject of the photograph is moving, it will not stop it. It also can only stabilize so much motion, ranging from 2 to 5 stops, depending on the specific is in the lens. Canon has released several versions of the EOS system, including the following: the first version, first used in the 75 to 300mm lens, takes approximately 1 second to stabilize, provides approximately 2 stops of stability, is not suitable for use on a tripod, or for panning. The 300mm f/4L EOS M lens, released in 1997, adds is Mode 2, which detects whether panning is taking place horizontally or vertically, and only compensates for vibration in the plane perpendicular to the plane of panning. In 1999, with the release of the EOS Super telephoto lenses, tripod detection was added, so that the lens could be used on a tripod with is turned on. In 2001, a new version of the image stabilizer was created for the 70-200mm f/2.8L. This version takes approximately 0.5s and can be stabilized up to 3 stops. In 2006, the 70-200mm f/4L EOS M was released with an image stabilizer which allows up to 4 stops of stabilization. In 2008, the 200mm f/2L EOS M was released with a new version of EOS which allows up to 5 stops of stabilization. In 2009, the 100mm f/2.8L macro EOS M became the first Canon lens with a hybrid image stabilizer. In addition to correcting angular movement, hybrid is also corrects for shift movement. In 2011, with the release of the 300mm f/2.8L EOS-2 and 400mm f/2.8L EOS-2, EOS Mode 3 was added. This mode is similar to Mode 2, except that stabilization is applied only when the shutter is released. Some newer lenses include an image stabilizer which can automatically detect whether the user is panning and respond accordingly, and therefore these lenses do not have an EOS mode switch. All EF lenses that support EOS have the words image stabilizer written on the lens. On some of Canon's larger telephoto lenses, the words image stabilizer are etched onto a metal plate affixed to the lens. Diffractive optics. Diffractive optics are special lens elements that are used in some lenses. DO lenses are usually smaller and lighter and are better at handling chromatic aberration, compared to conventional lenses of similar focal length and aperture value. They are more expensive to make. Only the EF 400mm f/4 DO EOS M, its updated Mark II version, and the EF 70-300mm f/4.5 5.6 DO EOS M contain DO elements. DO lenses have a green ring on the barrel. L-series lenses. Top-range Canon EF lenses are designated L-series, or luxury lenses. L-series lenses are compatible with the full range of EF or EFS mounts, and as they are aimed at the high-end user, most also include environmental or weather sealing and a constant maximum aperture. All L lenses are supplied complete with a hood and pouch, which are not included with non-L lenses. Distinctive visual cues include a red ring around the lens and an off-white color on longer focal length models. The latter, as well as looking distinctive, also helps to reflect light and reduce heat absorption. All L lenses include at least one fluorite or ultra-low dispersion glass element, and/or certain types of aspherical elements. Other mechanical characteristics of L lenses are the use of an ultrasonic motor for focusing and image stabilization. Owning a number of L-series lenses along with at least 2 professional EOS camera bodies is a requirement for admittance into the Canon professional services in most markets. However, in the United States, CPS eligibility requirements were changed in 2011 to a points-based system, in which each piece of professional-level equipment is assigned a point value, with a photographer's total determining eligibility for a given membership level. All current camera bodies apart from the Rebel series can be used to meet membership requirements. Eligible lenses include all L lenses, both DO lenses, many mid-range EF non-L lenses, and several EFS lenses. In fact, an American photographer can qualify for CPS membership by owning bodies only, or lenses only. Communication protocol. The communication protocol between the camera is 8 data bit, 1 stop bit SPI. The pins, from right to left on the lens, are the information from the lenses used by the camera body for focusing and metering, and with digital camera bodies it is used to record the lens parameters and the EXIF data in the images. All L-series primes 135mm or longer, the 400mm do, the 70-200mm zooms, the 100, the Euro 400mm zoom, and the 50mm compact macro have 3 additional communication pins. These additional pins are used by the Canon extender EF adapters in the life-size converter EF to indicate to the lens the change in focal length so that it is able to report the correct focal length and aperture to the camera body when mounted on a teleconverter. The lens also reduces autofocus speed when a teleconverter is attached to improve autofocus accuracy. List of EF lenses. The following is a list of EF lenses made by Canon. The I-2, 3 Roman numeral suffix after the focal length, S, indicates the generation number. While I is used in the table below, it is never used in official Canon model numbers. The original model lacks a Roman numeral and only the second and subsequent generations have them. In addition, the 3 image-stabilized wide-angle primes introduced in 2012 and the 16 Euro 35mm zoom introduced in 2014 also lack Roman numerals, as they are Canon's first lenses available in those focal lengths. The EF lenses are grouped below by their focal lengths: zoom for zoom lenses that have a range of focal lengths, prime for prime lenses that have a single focal length, zoom. Prime. Exceptions: Canon has 2 further types of lenses compatible with the EF mount, tilt shift and the 1-5x macro lens, which are not designated EF, but TSE and MPE respectively. TS stands for tilt shift while MP stands for macro photo. These types of lenses are not designated EF as they are manual focus only lenses. They do, however, retain electronic aperture control as well as focus confirmation. See also, Canon EF Lens Mount, Canon Efm Lens Mount, Canon FD Lens Mount, Notes. References: Markering, Willem Jan. Camera mounts and registers. Retrieved on November 6, 2005. Tiffin.com. Lens to filter chart. For list of filter sizes. External links: EF-EOS Lens Chart, Canon Camera Museum, Canon EOS Technocyclopedia, Canon EF Lenses, a Euro lens chart with technical specifications, comments and test references.